Okay, we started. Okay, hello everyone, shalom. This has been a long, wonderful, thank God, teaching day. As I was saying to Carol, this is my third class of the day. I met with 100 people at Valencia Palms in the Hadassah group, and they wanted to learn about Kabbalah. So in 45 minutes, I did an introduction to Kabbalah. And I gave out membership applications to the temple. I didn't mention the temple, I threw in the address also. Yes. And then I teach a class every Thursday for 3 hours online on Kabbalah also. And so here we are. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Amen. So, as you all have heard, I think I started to talk about this last week. Was that just last week?
2 weeks ago.
Oh, thank God I wasn't wrong, right? Yeah, last week was baseball. Okay. Can anyone take me out to the baseball game in Yiddish? Anyone can say?
No, I never heard that.
Take me out to the ball game. Okay. Anyway, is that I did when I went through the books of the Tanakh of the Bible, which we went through, and I said we are known as the people of the book, but actually, of course, that means the Bible. In Hebrew, remember, Tanakh. Everyone say Tanakh. Okay. However, in truth, we are the people of the books, plural. As I mentioned to you, I'm just going to say this very briefly again. The Bible is made up of 39 books. Okay, it is an anthology. It's not one book, but rather each one can stand on its own. I mean, yes, obviously, as you know, it's divided into 3 sections, and the first section is comprised of 4 books, but it would be certainly wrong to say that Torah is made up of 5 chapters, or 5 sections, although they are very cohesive in terms of timeline, etc. So anyway, we are the people of the books, and there is a reason why throughout the Jewish community, throughout our history, for the most part, obviously not every, hi everybody. I'm on the camera, I'm not looking up to the wall or everything. I'm speaking to the camera.
Zoom.
My fan.
We have 4 people.
Okay.
There's 4 people.
4. Okay.
Talking to the wall.
Yes, I thought. Well, there's a joke about talking to the wall, right? Yeah, there's a joke about that. Anyway, talking about the Western Wall in Israel. Is that there's a reason for the high rate of literacy, and I went through that last time, because if you simply went to shul, synagogue, every single Shabbat, you would read through definitely read through the entire 5 books of Moses, the Torah, and many of the other books, and I just talked about last week, the Haftarah, 2 weeks ago, as well as some of the other books in the Bible, the book of Psalms completely. You'd have to become literate. Okay, you'd have to learn that. But what's very interesting is that when Jews moved out of Israel, the Bible was translated into other languages, such as English, French. I remember when Judy and I were in Cancun many years ago on vacation, and we went for Shabbat to the shul in city of Cancun City, and you have Hebrew and Spanish, of course. Okay. So the books. And today we are really in an extraordinary time that we are living in terms of Jewish history. Something is occurring now that has never could not occur in previous times, and that is the internet, and literally, and the ability of translation. So some of you know the book that I've been working on for 54 years now, Ma'av Yavok, which was a Hebrew text actually printed in 1627 in Mantua, Italy. And I've been working on a translation for 54 years, and obviously I don't do this full time, to say the least. And the fact is that I found online an AI translation of the entire work. And it's actually 1,600 pages. By the way, and I'm not boasting, this is my translation, and not even the whole book yet. Okay, look at all these pages. This is my translation, double-sided. So anyway, the bottom line is, but the fact is that with AI, and I'm in the process of talking with a person who did this. He's a PhD at MIT in, believe it or not, particle physics and dark matter. not in Judaica and Judaism, but the fact is he programmed something into a computer and published and printed, not published, he printed the AI translation text, as I said, at 1,600 pages in English, okay, with footnotes. So the fact is, we are at a time now in human history that almost, I mean, not almost, if anyone wanted to, every single book, I mean, when you go into my library, my office, and you see a lot of Hebrew books there, a lot of them have never been translated to English for various reasons. And therefore, today there's the ability to translate all of them in every single language in the world thanks to computers.
But are they accurate? Are they accurate?
Well, that's the thing, is that there's some inaccuracies with this and whatever, and also the class that I teach every Thursday is made up of 8 students. We've been doing this now for 5 years, going through my translation. And as interesting as the translation might be, it's our discussions about them, which obviously is lacking with a computer. And the different sidetracks we get off on all the time. It's a great group of people, and interestingly enough, out of the 7 of them, 6 of them are all on the West Coast. Only one of them is on the East Coast, although he travels around the world.
Are
Yes?
you going to include your discussions as footnotes in your book?
We're not sure. Right now we're just setting that aside. There's a lot of possibilities with that. But the fact is that we are reaching an incredible time where literally Jewish literacy is for everyone and not just the scholar. And think about, for instance, let's say going back, hey Noah, Jonathan, how you doing? Noah, somebody else. Noah, of course, we know who Noah was in the Bible. But anyway, if you think about it, 400 years ago, when you have people 500 years ago in Israel, like Joseph Cairo, the writer of the Shulchan Aruch, and he's quoting this book and that book and the other book, he has to be, what? A very wealthy person, because to have a library of books 500 years ago, you had to have a lot of money, because so few books were being published, obviously not on the scale that we have today. And we're looking just at Temple Library here. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the main books. I indicated them last time. Today we're going to go through them to give you a feeling of the enormity. And this is the whole thing. What I'm trying to do is, this class, these sessions, is how to be a Jew today. Well, the fact is you have access to all of these. I mean, you look at this. These are not my translations. I went online. I went on to Sefaria, 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 has many thousands of Hebrew texts online, number one, in Hebrew or the language of Aramaic, but also most of them in some kind of a translation, okay? And they're all there for any of you, any book that you come across if you're interested. So I chose these significant books to look at, to give you a flavor for them, and then possibly, maybe I'll have enough time today to begin looking at Jewish history very briefly, and then the next class, which is next week, is going to be, on the life cycle. Okay, so here we go, Mishnah. Remember Tanakh? Okay, beginning in the 300s. When I say the Tanakh 300s, the Bible was written from the beginning to the 300s. The latest parts of the Bible, the book of Daniel, the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, which is the Persian period, is somewhere in the 300s, okay? The Mishnah is 500 years later. We do not have a lot of books written during this period. Were books written? Of course they were. Or something was written, however they were writing in those days, a papyrus or whatever. But the fact is, yes, things were being written. Judaism was being taught, and not, remember, just in Israel. By the year, let's say 100, let's say, for instance, let's say the year 50 before the Common Era, which was what? Who was in charge of Israel? 50 before the Common Era, starts with an R, ends with an N. The Romans. Okay, there were Jews living throughout the entire Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, if you know anything about it, stretched all the way from the Middle East all the way to where? England, right? There probably were Jews in the North and the Far East as well as that point in time, and that was the beginning of the Chinese restaurant. That's a joke. You don't know, that's when it started. When the Jews arrived, they said, okay, that sounds good. Okay, anyway, because what are you going to do in Christmas? There's no Christmas yet, of course, that's beside the point. I'm mixing up my dates completely. But the fact is what? Is we were everywhere, and we had to do the teachings, we had to continue to discuss the topics that were important to us and continue Jewish life. If it didn't happen, what I'm saying now, guess what? We wouldn't be here at Temple Sinai. Okay, Mishnah is 200 Common Era. The beginning of Tractate Barachot, that's the first of the sections of the Mishnah. The first tractate is the first of the 6 orders of the Mishnah. In other words, if you were to go to a Mishnah, it's made up of 6 orders. We can call them 6 volumes, 6 books, whatever you like to call it. Opens with a discussion of the recitation of Shema. As the recitation of Shema encompasses an acceptance of the yoke of heaven and the mitzvot, and as such forms the basis of all subsequent teachings. The Mishnah opens with the laws regarding the appropriate time to recite the Shema. Okay, now you might say, well, why? I know what to say the Shema. I come to temple Friday nights, that's when I say it. Okay, no. Okay, so Shema is supposed to be said twice every single day. And it says what? When you wake up in the morning, when you go to sleep at night. But the fact is, what time is that? When do you wake up? And remember, the rabbis were attempting to make a uniform way of life. So not every single person is doing their own thing, because then what are you lacking? Community. And of course, so therefore you had the concept of Jews coming together to say the Shema in the morning, and to say it at night, a morning service, an evening service, an afternoon service. But guess what? The beautiful and exciting thing about this, what you're reading here, is a first-hand document of life 2,000 years ago in Israel as Judaism began to be formed. They asked the question, when do you say the Shema? We know, and we think we know, and that definitely if you're more traditional, maybe you got a front row. You gave a big donation this week. Did you give a big donation this week? She's ignoring the question altogether. Okay.
I was at a chapter.
Okay, now, notice this is now the beginning of the Mishnah. From when that is, from what time does one recite the Shema in the evening? So remember, in the morning and the evening. How do you know that? Because the Via Hafta says, you shall have the Lord your God, and when you wake up in the morning, you sleep. Yes, we know that. You're correct about Uvalefecha. Okay, I check it in other sources. So the fact is, twice a day you're supposed to say it. So therefore, they ask, when did you say it in the evening? Okay, can you say it any time you want to? When do you say it? From the time when the priest entered for to take of the truma until, okay, so when what time at the night can you begin saying the Shema? Well, the priest and evening, but it doesn't indicate to you what evening, except it tells you something was happening. Remember, the temple in Jerusalem was still in existence up into the year 70 of the Common Era, when it was destroyed by the Romans. So keep in mind, this is being written before the destruction of the temple. And people living at that time wondered, okay, we say this because not everyone was a priest, not everyone was working in the temple. They worked as people shoeing horses, and bakers, and butchers, and salesmen, and at stores, and what? Candlestick maker, everything. Butcher, baker, candlestick maker. Yes, and so everything. So the priests, when the priests go to make their offering for the evening offering, that's when you do it. Now another one, until what time does the time of the recitation of the evening Shema extend? Okay, so we got the beginning. But until what time can you continue to say the Shema? Can you say the Shema until midnight? Can you say the Shema all the way until the sun comes up the next morning? When do we remember, think about 2,000 years ago. We think we know when the day begins and when it doesn't. We really don't, right? How many of you go to sleep at 8 o'clock at night? Every night. You go to sleep, okay, so your day ends at you, that's it, the day's over. How many of you go to sleep at 11? How many of you watch Kimmel? Okay. So what do we govern ourselves? Or if you work, let's say for instance, if you're a police officer, let's say, and you have a night shift, your day, your whole thing is different. Okay. So notice what it says, until the end of the first watch. Now what is the watch? A watch. It's not this watch, but again, there were guards out on the gate who had a watch, but obviously no guard can stay up 12 hours and be alert, so they had different watches of the night. The term used in the Torah to indicate the time for the recitation of the Shema evening is, and this is Mindy's word, Bahalotecha. Okay? When you lie down, which refers to the time in which individuals go to sleep. But we now know that the individuals go to sleep at different times. Therefore, the time of the recitation of Shema is in the first portion of the night when individuals typically prepare for sleep. So in other words, you can say the Shema according to this opinion until the time that you normally go to sleep. Okay, whenever that is. Now, for some of us, it differs a lot. Okay? That is the statement of who? Rabbi Eliezer. So you notice that this is a first-hand accounting. Now you might say, they didn't have tape recorders then. What does that mean, Rabbi Eliezer said that? How did they know that? Going back to most ancient times, and not only in Jewish community, there was a very, very important person, and this was a person who had an audiographic memory. In the Hebrew, it's called the chozeh. This is a person who can hear anything and then write it down immediately or later, word for word. By the way, this is not just us. So take, for instance, the Iliad, the Odyssey. Those of you who remember those books, okay, Homer's big, really big stuff, okay. They were all sung, probably, or offered. They were poems, sung, probably, audially. So why do we have them today? This is the Greek period, right? 200 probably before BCE, because there was a chozeh who heard it and then immediately was able to write it down. Okay? And this was critical for Jewish culture, because without that we'd have nothing. We wouldn't have the Mishnah, we have the Talmud, nothing. They had these people that they were being hired, they probably were paid to sit there, and as the rabbis would be discussing these things, they didn't have to write down everything because they would remember it later on. And interestingly enough, some of you might be familiar with this person, the Lubavitcher Rabbi, who is very well known. He was the founder of the Chabad movement. I think he died in 1976, I think. Anyway, he had a chozeh. 86 maybe? Anyway, he had a chozeh. In other words, modern times we do have tape recorders, but he continued the tradition, and this rabbi, I forget his name right now, he died about 2 years ago. He was a chozeh. What? No, not him, but his chozeh. His chozeh. And anyway, he had someone who literally could do this. So there are obviously people who have a photographic mind, but there are others who have an audiographic mind, which is key. Okay. The rabbis say, now the rabbis are sitting around discussing this, when do you say the Shema? In the nighttime. The time for the recitation of the Shema is until midnight. So that extends it. Because let's say, for instance, I go to sleep every night at 11 o'clock. But on the other hand, I could, if I didn't go to sleep at 11 o'clock, it's not based upon, therefore, my time when I go to sleep or turn the lights off, or Judy says, okay, enough, okay. But rather, it's till midnight. Rabbi Gamliel says, notice, this is what? Notice the difference of opinion now. One may recite Shema until dawn. That's a lot of time. In other words, you can now, but notice what he's going to say, indicating that Bahalotacha is to be understood as a reference to the entire time people sleep in their beds the whole night. So it's based upon the time you're in your bed, not when you go to sleep. And if you're sleeping in your bed, let's say you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, oh my God, the Manischewitz is worn off, so you're out of your drunken stupor, and you forgot to, oh my God, I forgot to say the Shema. You can still say the Shema according to this. And notice, what does it also have say or not say? You don't have to go to shul to say the Shema. Say it in your bed by yourself. Now, the next one is interesting. The Mishnah relates that Rabbi Gamliel practiced in accordance with this ruling. And Rabbi Gamliel was a very, very important rabbi. And so his ruling was the most accepted. Now, notice what they do. What's beautiful about the Mishnah, and definitely in the Talmud later on, which is, you'll see in a moment, is an expansion of the Mishnah, is they give personal examples. There was an incident when Rabbi Gamliel's sons returned very late from a wedding hall. In other words, they were having a good party. They're out there drinking, partying around, whatever. And they said to Dad that they've been preoccupied with celebrating with the groom and bride. We didn't say the Shema. Dad, what do we do? And he said to them, if the dawn has not yet arrived, you are obligated to recite the Shema. Okay, so notice how great that is. Okay, when Judy and I went, by the way, for those of you who don't know, we met in high school, junior year in high school, and we went to the prom together, Copacabana, Manhattan, and we lived in Rockaway by the ocean, and so we came back with all the other kids. We went to the beach, and I'll leave the rest of this indescribable. Okay, but the fact is that we were up the whole night. Well, as long as we got back before the sun came up, I could have still said the Shema. Did I? We don't go there. Okay. But anyway, so notice what's happening here. This is a live, living document called the Mishnah, written in 200 in Israel, in the Holy Land, by these rabbis who were a part of the Sanhedrin. Now this became very critical. Why? Because when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70, and there was no longer any place for Jews to continue the ancient rituals that are described. We're getting this now for those of you coming to synagogue this week. We begin the third book of the Torah by Leviticus, which describes many of the ancient rituals. Once the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, they couldn't practice them anymore. So the rabbis, such as Gamliel and Eliezer and all these guys, said, you know something, we have to reimagine Judaism for a new time. And they created a Judaism that we are the recipients of in light of no temple. Okay, let's continue now. I'm not going to do this whole thing. These are for you to take home with you and study. There'll be a test next week. Okay. No, don't get nervous. Okay. Some people get nervous when people say that. Okay. The Babylonian Talmud. Now notice what happens. If the Mishnah was 200, the Babylonian Talmud was 500. How many years? 300 more years go by. That's a lot of years, right? Okay. By the way, there was another Talmud written in Israel, in Jerusalem, called the Jerusalem Talmud, which was written in the year 400. The Jerusalem Talmud, the community, by around the year 400 died off. It went kaput. It was not doing well financially. They were definitely affected by the breakup of the Roman Empire. And of course, what began to develop during this period of time? Christianity and the Holy Christian Empire began to develop. It was not a good time for Jews, especially living there. And many of the Jews said, okay, we're going to go to Miami. No, it wasn't Miami. We ain't going to go there yet. We're going to go to Babylonia. Because Jews are very welcome to Babylonia, which was, of course, northeast. And Babylonia today is what country? Iraq. Okay, Iraq is Babylonia. And Iraq and Iraq. So they went up to Iraq and Iran. Okay, so now imagine 300 years go by. So what was being described here with Rabbi Eliezer about the time of the saying of the Shema, it's changed a lot. Life has changed. Babylonia was a major empire, a trading empire, like today, except obviously not modern. And very different than the Jerusalem community of the year 200, to say the least, much more sophisticated, and Jews had to adapt to that. And therefore, they had to take the laws of the Torah that are now discussed in the Mishnah, and they had to update them. We're always modifying. Okay, so the Talmud is the textual record of generations of rabbinic debate about law, philosophy, and biblical interpretation. I read this fast because you can read along with me fast. Compiled between the 3rd and 8th centuries and structured as a commentary in the Mishnah with stories interwoven. The Talmud is made up of 2 parts, as you'll see in a moment. First, they quote a Mishnah. Okay, you understand now Mishnah? Who knows Mishnah now, right? And then they add a Gemara, which is the Gemara is their discussions about the Mishnah. Okay, that's what that means. So, for instance, this is the 250th anniversary year of the Constitution of the United States. We have a Constitution, which was written 250 years ago approximately, and we have common law. Obviously, the laws are constantly updated in courts and blah, 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 whatever. Or totally ignored. I'm not going to go there. Okay. The Talmud exists in 2 versions. The more commonly studied Babylonian Talmud was compiled in present-day Iraq, while the Jerusalem Talmud was compiled in Israel. Okay. So, Orthodox Judaism today is based upon the Babylonian Talmud, okay? Because it lasted longer, it's 100 years later. However, there are many scholars who will also go to the Jerusalem Talmud sometimes. What's very interesting is, I'm just going to throw this out for free, this is free thought, okay, teaching. Reform Judaism goes back to the earliest sources. So take, for instance, you might have gone to some synagogues where, like ours, everyone stands for Kaddish, the memorial prayer for those who died. In other synagogues, particularly conservative and Orthodox, only mourners stand for Kaddish. Guess what? The Babylonian Talmud community, only mourners stood. In the Jerusalem Talmud community, 100 years before that in Israel, guess what? Everyone stood. Okay, so there are variations in practice. Reform Judaism wanted to go back to the earliest sources. Whether that was good or bad or different doesn't matter. I'm just throwing out a little bit of history about Reform Judaism. Okay, so notice the Mishnah. Am I going too fast for everyone?
No.
Okay, I know you're very smart. Okay. Mishnah. Notice, this is the exact words from the Mishnah we just studied, right? So you're learning Talmud now, right, John? You're so excited? Okay. From when, that is, from what time does one recite Shema in the evening from the time? Okay, we just read that, right? We just read that a few seconds ago in that page from the Mishnah. So the Gemara then, the Mishnah opens with the laws concerning the appropriate time to recite Shema with the question from when does one. Now, let's go to the second paragraph. This is the text now. The first paragraph there was just an introduction. The Gemara asks, and furthermore, what distinguishes the evening Shema that it was taught first? In other words, why not discuss what Shema? The morning one. Why did they start with the evening?
Because
Like
the evening is the beginning.
Well,
of
let's
the day.
see. Like the Tana teach regarding the recitation of the morning Shema first. The word Tana means a teacher, a rabbi. In the earliest text, the word Tana means a rabbinic teacher, a rabbi. In the later text, they're called Amoraim. They're simply different words for rabbis or teachers. Now, notice, alluding to sort of what Linda was saying, the bride. By the way, let's give it up for Linda and Reuben, who were blessed this past week with the ceremony of love. Yes, Mazel Tov, guys. Okay, very good. Okay. Since most mitzvot apply during the day, the Tana should discuss the morning Shema before discussing the evening Shema. Just as the daily morning offerings is discussed before the evening offering. And so, in other words, notice what they're doing. They're asking a very logical question. If it's been taught that we discuss the morning offerings when the Temple of Jerusalem was around first, then why isn't the Shema discussed first? You might say, who cares? Does it really matter? Yes, if you are defining Jewish life. We accept all these things now, we don't question them. But imagine during the time, why is this in the way? Oh yeah. But imagine that this is the time of creation of Jewish life, that we're the recipients of today. So notice, let's continue a little bit more. The Gemara offers a single response to both questions. The Tana bases himself, in other words, the question is why no one had discussed the Shema in the morning, the morning Shema before the evening. And he quotes from Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, as you all know. You will talk of them when you sit in your home, when you walk along the way, when you lie down, and when you arise. Of course, my mitzvah students know, of course, that's the Yahafta prayer. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. By teaching the laws of the Shema first, the Tana has established that the teachings of the oral Torah correspond to that which is taught in the written Torah. Since notice, the written Torah from the Yahafta says, first, when you sit in your home, and then when you walk on your way, when you lie down, and then when you get up. So that's why it follows the verses. It talks about nighttime first, and then in the morning. So therefore, let's discuss the Shema in the evening first. Chen?
What if you don't sleep through the whole night? What if you get up a few times during the night?
You can say it anytime you want to.
Do you have to say it again and again?
No, just once. Oh yeah, good question. No, if you go to sleep and wake up, no, just once is enough. Okay, good question. Yeah, so there's a joke about, of course, the reason why it's difficult if you have an Orthodox astronaut going around the Earth, because he never gets anything done in the spaceship or whatever it is, the space shuttle, because he's always praying, because fill it on, because he goes around, Anyway, so you understand what's going on here, right? Yes.
Okay, I have a question. So what you're talking about, and I apologize if you already said this, we were a few minutes late, but what you're talking about is sort of all the nuances of when do you say it and why does it tell you to say it. Where is the origin of all this? Where does it say?
Why do we say it?
Why do we say
The Torah.
Shema every day?
The Torah says it. So the Yahafta says that every V'chol Yom V'chol Laila, every night and day you'll say the Shema.
And that's in the
Right.
Torah itself.
For all of what's called halakha, or Jewish law or practice, it's essential that a rabbi finds the basis of that in the Torah text somehow. Now sometimes it's a stretch. So for instance, nowhere in the Torah, we read about this actually, I think last week's Torah portion at the end, we didn't do this in Temple. However, nowhere in the Torah does it say thou shalt not eat a cheeseburger. Okay, there is no, of course I didn't know about cheeseburgers then, but anyway, no place in the Torah does it say thou shalt not mix milk and meat. So, however, during the rabbinic period, in other words, during the Mishnah and the Talmud, as they began to develop the laws of dietary laws of kashrut, they took the verse that I think we read, it was in the Torah portion from last week, thou shalt not take a kid, a baby goat, while it is sucking from its mother, getting the milk from its mother. And because milk, and it's a thou shalt not thing, you will not do that. So therefore, because it's a thou shalt not thing, and it's talking about meat, the goat, and milk, the mother's milk, in the same verse, therefore you can't mix milk and meat. Duh. Does it say that? No. But they have to find a verse in the Torah.
Okay, so all law has to originate in
Somewhere.
the Torah, even though there might be like all of these interpretations
Right.
and nuances, but it has to exist there first.
Exactly. The same way is, and I know I'm not getting involved in the politics of today. However, any law that occurs here in our country, what do? You question the constitutionality of it, meaning,
Right.
where did you get this from? Did you make it up? You can't make it up. A judge can't make up anything, they can say anything, although some of these judges, they do, and that's a whole other story. But the fact is, you can't just make up anything you want to. The same way, and we're going to come to this at the end of this, is what's called a teshuva, or rabbinic response. And you'll see, rabbis are asked questions all the time, especially Orthodox rabbis, as life changes, and whatever decisions they make have to be based upon their interpretation of the Torah law, Mishnah law, Talmud law, the other rabbis. You have to quote all these people, not to just show off that they know so much, but rather they have to substantiate. They can't be just making it up. Okay, so continue. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank
Good.
you.
Okay, now, Mishnah Torah. We're moving along in time, as you'll see, but that's the purpose of the class today, to move us along in time, to give you this is like going to a Chinese buffet, okay? You have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And for those of you interested in actually studying these books, okay, this is what they have fun. No, you can do this online or we'll have a class. Okay, Mishnah Torah. The code of rabbinic Jewish religious law, halakha. The Hebrew word for law is not law, it's not Torah, it is halakha. Authored by Maimonides. The Mishnah Torah was compiled between 1170 and 1180 of the Common Era. While Maimonides was living in Egypt, as regarded as Maimonides' magnus opus, his greatest work is considered to be the Mishnah Torah. Now, the Mishnah Torah does go through a tremendous amount, goes through all of the laws, and what was interesting, what he did was, he not only wrote about, in other words, the question is, if a rabbi is great as Maimonides, by the way, Maimonides did a lot of, he was a practicing judge, he was a practicing physician, he actually wrote certain books on medicine that is actually still being used in medical schools today, okay? They also named the hospital after him in Brooklyn, that's how famous he is, okay? But the fact is that he did a lot, he didn't have to do this. So if someone's writing a book on this is what you're supposed to do now, with this, and this is what you're not supposed to do, what does that mean about people? They were what? They weren't doing things. They were lost. They didn't know how to do anything. They didn't know what Jews like. So here's a book. Now again, considering the 12th century, the fact is you still had to have money to have these books of his, number one. And number two is how many copies you think they made of these books. That's a whole other story. Okay. So I simply went not to the books of the laws. And by the way, he also, Maimonides, I'll talk about this in a moment, the Shulchan Aruch, is that his laws, he wrote also about all the laws pertaining to the temple in Jerusalem, although it had already been in non-existence for 800 years. Because he hoped that the fact is it would be rebuilt, and therefore we needed all these laws to help us to know what to do. Interesting. The Shulchan Aruch, which I'll talk about in a few moments, written 400 years later, Joseph Cairo left out all of the laws pertaining to the temple in Jerusalem. Because what's the point right now? Okay. Anyway, Maimonides was also a philosopher. And why did he need to do this? Again, people write things like this because people need direction and help. Jews were lost during the 11th century. You're talking about Spain, North Africa, Egypt, and all those areas were Jews living in Europe, of course they were. But Maimonides was writing for Jews in that part of the world. And one of his other great works was called Moreh Nevuchim, which means Guide for the Perplexed. Moreh Nevuchim is an amazing philosophical, not a halach, not a legal text, of philosophical work, which was written in response to Jews who simply were leaving Judaism. And they were saying, you know something, none of this stuff makes any sense to me. All this irrational stuff and whatever, it's nonsense. All this Bible stuff and God stuff, it's ridiculous. And therefore, because why? I'm a rationalist. I follow Greek philosophy, Aristotle, etc. And I believe what you can't see, and that's it. And God, there's no God. Where is God? And they questioned everything, and they started to leave Judaism. So Maimonides wrote this book called Guide for the Perplexed, in which he answers the questions about, and he developed interestingly enough, to assist these kinds of Jews who are leaving Judaism, a rational Judaism. His definition, basically, God was the supreme, infinite mind of the universe. And therefore, this supreme mind of the universe communicates with our mind, and therefore, he went through, in his Sefer Mitzvot, he went through the rational reason for all of the Mitzvot. All 613 of them. At least the ones he could come up with a reason. Okay. So the fact is, he wanted to show that, yeah, guess what, guys? You think Greek philosophy is rational? We're rational. And that's what he appealed to. So notice in this book, this incredible book, Mishnah Torah, about Jewish law, how does he begin? Sefer Madah, the book of knowledge, is the opening of Mishnah Torah. The foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom is to know that there is a primary being who brought into being all existence. All the beings of the heavens, the earth, and what is between them came into existence only from the truth of his being. If one would imagine that he does not exist, no other being could possibly exist. If one would imagine that none of the entities aside from him exist, he alone would continue to exist. And the nullification of their existence would not nullify his existence, because all the other entities require him, and he, blessed be he, does not require them, nor any of them. Therefore, the truth of his being does not resemble the truth of any other being. He spends a tremendous amount of time in the opening of Mishnah Torah, which is a legal work about how to live a Jewish life, keeping kosher and all the things that Orthodox Jews do today, and traditional Jews did then. There were no Reformed Jews yet, etc. Either you were fully observant or you were nothing in Judaism. The fact is, he starts off with a rational description of God. Because therefore, if God is rational, he also stated, for instance, God cannot violate God's own laws. So for instance, the miracles, in quotes, that are experienced, we might experience a miracle, God already wrote into his law process. So for instance, take for instance in the Torah, there's the story in Numbers of about a talking donkey. Okay, everyone remembers Mr. Ed from TV. Yeah. Nobody knows a horse, of course. Nobody knows a talking horse, or the kid, the talking car. Remember, what was that show? The kid. That was a great. Remember that show?
Yes.
Herbie.
No, Herbie's another one. All these talking things. What?
Talking car.
No, the talking car.
It was
Kid.
the talking
What?
Michael's.
No, it was a great show. It was about a detective guy. Yeah. Anyway. Let's go back to the talking donkey with Bilam in the Bible, in the book of Numbers, is that's like a miracle. I mean, I don't know, have any of you met, Carol, have you ever met a talking donkey? Okay, that's good. Anyway, I won't say if you haven't met a talking ASS, okay. But anyway, however, the fact is that Maimonides said God wrote into history itself that donkey would talk. Because you can't have God, even with God, God cannot even break his own system of law. Because why? God is a rational, spiritual being. Okay, so we're going to skip down now to Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is the most widely accepted code of Jewish law ever written, compiled in the 16th century by Rabbi Joseph Cairo. It is a condensed and simplified version of Beit Yosef, a commentary that Cairo wrote on the Torah, which is another book on Jewish law. Cairo's rulings are in accordance with the Sephardic traditions. The text of the Shulchan Aruch also includes the glosses of Rabbi Moshe Isserles, which cite Ashkenazic traditions. Okay, everyone, stay where you are. I have to get something from my office to show you. So don't go away. Larry, talk about yourself. I mean, talk with you. Can you sing a song or something? That's where they'll all leave. Good. That's good.
I don't think so.
I keep hearing it. Yeah, just again.
Excuse me, I don't think you've seen it.
Yeah, I did sign it. I did
Do you want to write who's on Zoom?
I took a screenshot. Let me email you the screenshot. Okay?
Because you could just write it here. You don't have to bother
Jenny,
emailing it.
we didn't sign.
What?
We didn't sign.
We didn't sign.
We didn't sign.
Oh, sorry.
He went into his office. I know.
Okay, here I am. Hi, bye, girls, ladies, see ya. Okay.
Right behind you.
Okay, now, this is the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, this is one of 11 volumes.
It's very small print.
Yeah, I know. They're not putting, okay. Look at this. One of set 11 volumes for the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so the top middle box here is the text, the Shulchan Aruch. All of these are commentaries written about him. And let me tell you, they argued about everything and disagreed about everything.
Who's they? Who's the they?
The Shach disagreed with the Taz disagreed with Maimonides, and Maimonides disagreed with the Rambam. And all of these people, and these are laws, for instance, forget about it, keeping kosher. Salting of meat. There is so, oh my God, I was studying recently, because I'm studying for some reason or other this part, for some reason or other. And let's say, for instance, you have a dairy knife, whatever that means. But remember, if you keep your kosher home, you have dairy and milk and fleisch, okay? If they're two sets of oil. So you have a dairy knife, and by accident, you stick it into a container, a plate, a bowl of meat sauce. The question they get in, does it make the whole knife trafe, or only the part that goes in? And then what do you, and they get into all these discussions, and they all just argue about it.
In the backyard.
Well, you do that too, yeah. So anyway, this is the Shulchan Aruch, and you can see how much thought goes into the definitions of life. Okay, so that's that book. So let's
Is he commenting on these prior books, like on the Maimonides, what he did, or you say that when he said, I'm still confused about the commentary.
Yeah. What?
I'm still confused about when you said the commentary. When you have what he wrote, the guy that wrote.
Because he's writing about things that Maimonides wrote about also 400 years before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then other people are commenting about that, or those are
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. There's books and books. Yes. Yeah.
There was something that happened in Brooklyn about 5 or 10 years ago, Brooklyn, New York, about a kosher who was selling his kosher chickens to the Orthodox community. And somehow it was found out that they weren't kosher.
Yeah.
People were throwing out their ovens.
Well, of course, there's a big problem. But let's, yeah. But
About 5 or 10 years ago in Brooklyn, New York, there was an Orthodox community in Brooklyn where people bought their chickens from this Orthodox rabbi. And it was found out, that the chickens were not kosher.
yeah. Well, okay.
People threw out their stoves, their ovens.
Well, yeah, we have a big problem. But I'll tell you another example, which is really bizarre. But if you are observant of these things, but again, rabbis disagreed on all of these things. There was a kosher butcher on Long Island in Suffolk County, and he sold bottled water. However, believe it or not, there is kosher water and non-kosher water. And he was receiving, in New York State, you get the certificate of kashrut by the Orthodox community. That's what the state goes by, and not certainly Reform, not even conservative. But they had a conservative rabbi giving the hechsher, giving the okay in that place, in that store. So the fact is that they did not sell kosher water, and so the government said, well, this is not a kosher butcher, and therefore it went out of business. Now, what makes kosher water water? Kosher water. According to probably the later sources, not necessarily the Talmud, with a microscope, you have to determine, you're only allowed a certain number of bugs per milliliter of water. Any more bugs than that, because bugs are treif, not kosher, then it is not kosher water. So you can go meshuggah with this stuff, okay? But the rabbis disagreed always. Okay, let's look at Orach Chaim. Now, there's 4 sections to the Shulchan Aruch. One of them, again, notice Orach Chaim. I liked this one because it was kind of didn't get involved with kashrut, and because the laws get very involved. My grandmother's grandfather was the last rabbi in my family. He was an expert on malicha, which means the salting of meat. And he actually wrote a commentary to the Shulchan Aruch's text on salting of meat, which is, I'll never understand. Anyway, that's beyond my, whatever it is. Okay, anyway, because that gets very involved also. Do you wash the meat first and then you salt it? If you forgot to wash it, it's, okay, anyway. But this is a nice reading. One, Jane, you can sit down if you want to. Okay, just relax. Oh yeah, no, just, okay. One should strengthen himself like a lion to get up in the morning to serve his Creator. He should get up early enough to welcome in the dawn. Those of you who sleep till 11. Okay, at least not after the Zaman Tefillah time for praying, in which the congregation says, I have placed Hashem, God, before me always. This is a great concept in the Torah and is a paramount attribute for the tzaddikim, righteous people who walk in the way of God. So in other words, when you jump out of bed in the morning, you get out of bed in the morning, you should immediately say what? Thank you, God. Shema. Right, thank you, God, Shema. Now, I love Rabbi Danny Levin from Temple Bethel. I heard him with this teaching. When he gets up in the morning, he's lying in bed before he gets out of bed. He feels around like this, and if he doesn't feel good around him, he's pleased and he says, thank you. If you wake up and you feel wood around you, that is definitely not good. Okay. For the way in which a person sits, moves around, and carries out his daily activities while he's alone in his house is not the same way you should engage in these activities while standing before a great king. In other words, you should always be mindful of the fact that God sees everything. You better not cry, you better not pout, you better not pout you now. Okay, God is watching over you every place you go and whatever you do, and therefore be aware from the moment you wake up in the morning. And by the way, I don't know how many of you grew up, anyone here grew up really Orthodox, extreme? There's some movies I've seen, well, with some movies I've seen, for man, most of these laws are stated, and that is, there's actually supposed to be a bowl of water in your bed when you wake up in the morning. You're supposed to immediately wash your hands, especially men, because men, while they're sleeping, put their hands in places that are not so clean. Okay? And therefore they do nasty things, and therefore they have to constantly be aware of these things. It doesn't say that there, Mickey. It doesn't say that. No, not that. Okay. But much of the literature deals with, now I'll just talk about this for 1 second. It's not, well, it is probably somewhere in the Shulchan Aruch. The question you might wonder is, why does Orthodox or traditional Judaism focus so many of the laws and whatnot are on men? You could easily say, well, because traditional Judaism is a male-dominated religion going back to biblical times, and that's it, and it's prejudiced toward women, that's the way women are treated. Well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, but the nicer explanation is that all of the rituals are based upon the time. When you get up in the morning, when you say the Shema, when you go to shul, when you daven, when you put the tefillin on, when you go to the mikvah, all of these things are based upon time. We men, the men who are here, we have a big problem. We are not a part of time itself, whereas women are. Women are, first of all, giving birth. They're part of the cycles of nature, plus menstruation in terms of the cycles of nature and the months. And therefore, women are time itself. They don't have to be brought, they do not need to be brought into the cycles of time of life, whereas men do. And that's a nicer explanation.
Not true, though, because men, it's a patriarchal society, and therefore women were second class.
Yes, I'm not advocating one or the other, but that's the nicer explanation. But men get themselves into a lot of trouble, okay, a lot of the time. Right, John? Yeah. Yes, definitely. So, and I'm speaking for myself as well. And therefore, many of the laws are written regarding what men do or shouldn't be doing much of the time. Okay, so let's continue here. In addition, the way one speaks whilst amongst those in his home and the conversations he partakes with his relatives is not the same manner in which he would speak while in the presence of a mortal king. Surely, when one considers in his mind that the mighty king, the Holy One, blessed be he, where the whole world is filled with his glory, stands before him and sees his deeds. That's what I said before, as I stated. This is a very long run sentence. If a man will conceal his secrets and will not see it, states Hashem, immediately the fear and proper awed train of thought of Hashem will descend upon him, and he'll always be embarrassed before God. In other words, and I'll talk more about this tomorrow night, a little bit about the concept of humility. We should always be humble before other people. We shouldn't think we're the greatest thing in this that God has given humanity. But on the other hand, we also should always be humble before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, before God. And if that were the case, obviously many people today would be living a little bit differently, because there's such arrogance in the way people act today and treat other people, right? I'm not going to go into those details. Okay, let's turn the page over. Moving ahead nicely. Okay, and so therefore, notice, this book, the Shulchan Aruch, written in the 1500s, in response to what? Again, the Jews living in where? Israel. Joseph Cairo was living in Sfat in northern Israel. For those of you who've been to Israel, it's the city of the Kabbalists. And Joseph Cairo was certainly one of the greatest of all. And he's writing for that community again. Because guess what? There were Jews who were simply popping out of bed and going about their stuff and not caring about anything. In a traditional Jewish community, a man is always going to the mikvah, always going to the ritual bath, because he's always committing a sin, touching this and touching that. We'll leave that aside. I ain't just speaking about baseball players on the field.
So they have separate mikvahs then?
No. Oh, yes, definitely. Separate, yes, men and women, of course.
Checking?
Yes. Women will go for other reasons. A woman went during her monthly cycle, when the 7 days are over, has to go to the mikvah, and a woman will go certainly before her wedding, things like that. But a man must go. There's some men who go every single. Actually, my teacher in Jerusalem, Eliyahu Shir, who I study with every other week, Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, he goes to the mikvah every morning when he wakes up, because he is in a state of sin, possibly because of places where his hands went while he was sleeping, and they shouldn't go there. And that creates a problem. Or other things. I will throw this out to you briefly. What's called a seminal emission. I'm not going to explain that to anybody, but that goes on also. See what a good class this is. Everyone's happy, right? Everyone's fine. Okay. And that's a big sin, a really big sin, okay, which the rabbis in traditional literature spend a tremendous amount of time doing. And by the way, I don't know why I'm going to say this, but take, for instance, the whole concept of contraception. In traditional law, traditional community, a male is forbidden, a male is forbidden to do contraception, because the commandment to multiply, be fruitful and multiply, is upon the man, not the woman. So therefore, in traditional, and actually there's described in the Talmud, now you know when the Talmud was written, there's what's called a moch, which is a diaphragm that was used by women in Talmudic times when they have a certain number of children. Then they can start using the moch to prevent, obviously, conception. But a man is forbidden for the same reason, and therefore that's why seminal emission is also forbidden amongst men, whether it occurs on purpose or by accident. And I'm not going to go into that situation. Okay, let us look on page 6, the Zohar. Moving along in time, the 13th century in Spain. This is Kabbalah. By the way, everyone here is welcome, 9:30 every Saturday morning. We have a wonderful class studying the Zohar. The Zohar is the central work of Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah, traditionally attributed to the 2nd century sage, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. The Zohar's authorship has been subject to debate from the time it first appeared in the 13th century Spain. Most probably, it was not written by Shimon ben Yochai. However, he is quoted throughout the text, and his rabbi buddies, who lived in the 1st century of the Common Era. So, for instance, today, I could not do that. Well, I could, it's a novel. If I would write a story of my life, but I would call myself Rabbi Akiva, and writing about me, as long as it's a novel, fiction, I could get away with it. But if I were to say, and Rabbi Akiva did these things and blah, 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 and I made the whole thing up and attribute to someone, that's not too good a thing to do. Because people would say, what is that? You can't say that. Okay, you want to say plagiarism, but you don't get away with that. In those days, you could do that. You could even write things in those days and attribute it to someone else writing who's more famous than you are. So for instance, when I write my autobiography, I will say, and my name is Rabbi James Patterson, and I'm sure I will sell more books than Rabbi Steve Moss, you see. And today, in the old days, I could possibly get away with it. Today, obviously, they take me away to a loony bin or to jail. Okay. But those days it was called, actually, there's an actual technical term for this in English called pseudo-epigrapha, which means false attributions of authorship. You can get away with it in those days. You have to be careful when you read certain books because they would do that a lot. So anyway, whether Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he probably did not write the Zohar, which was written 1,200 years later in the 13th century, 14th century in Spain. The work centers around Rabbi Shimon and his students as they travel the land of Israel and interpret the Torah esoterically, which means the inner meanings of the Torah. Written primarily in the cryptic form of Aramaic, which was the Hebrew spoken 2,000 years ago, the Zohar discusses topics such as nature of God, the soul, and the creation of the world. And so this is the very opening section, which I'm sure Eric remembers, word for word, as we studied this about 2 years ago. It's still going, by the way, 9:30 Saturday mornings. Rabbi Chizkiah opened the discourse with the text as a lily among the thorns. SS means Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which is one of the books in the Bible. What he said does the lily symbolize? It symbolizes the community of Israel. As the lily among thorns is tinged with red and white, so the community of Israel is visited now with justice and now with mercy. As the lily possesses 13 leaves, so the community of Israel is vouchsafed 13 categories of mercy which surround it on every side. So you might say, Mindy, what in the world does this mean? The fact is, the Kabbalah sees everything as an allegory or a metaphor for something else. Nothing is what it actually is. It is actually something else. The world in which we're living in is something else. Everything has a meaning. You got to go and find the meaning. So for instance, why are there red and white lilies? Because white is the color of the Sphira, I'm not getting into Kabbalah now, chesed, kindness and love in the world. Red is the quality of Gevura, which means strict justice and judgment in the world. And well, both it could be, but both the chesed is good, obviously love and kindness. The white is good. The red could be very bad, but the two mixed together, you get something good, pink, which is nice. You got to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But the fact is that they represent the two qualities that the community of Israel experiences. We have good times, and we definitely have bad times. On the other hand, what is this 13 business? You all know the 13 attributes of God's mercy. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noseh Chesed L'Alafim, Noseh Yavon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakei. Wow, sounds pretty good. Okay, anyway, I'm getting ready for Yom Kippur. Slichot. But anyway, if you were to count Adonai, Adonai, okay, you come up with 13 words. That's the 13 attributes of God's mercy. Okay, so therefore, notice when they take a simple verse from the book of Song of Songs, they love Song of Songs because it's so allegorical, as the lily among the thorns, and also they go off in this whole thing describing Israel. That's what the Zohar does in a very beautiful, and by the way, as Eric knows, Eric's in the class, Lynn shows up sometimes, nobody else in this group, but it was welcome, okay, the way I love him anyway. But the fact is that it really is imaginative and it's highly, maybe I'll get more people with this when I say this word, erotic. Erotic, yes. Erotic, E-R-O-T-I-C, okay? You know what that means, right? Okay. The Zohar is filled with eroticism because the goal of our Jewish lives is to bring about the masculine and the feminine to have a interacting with each other in order to create harmony in the universe. What the world needs now, everyone, is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little love. Okay, for that. Okay, next one, Teshuva.
Before you leave that, doesn't also not just because the Torah too. It's midrash on the Torah.
Yes, it's a commentary to the Torah. Right, exactly. But unlike I didn't give examples of midrashim, which is a whole other part of the literature. Okay. However, the midrash, many books called midrashim, were rabbinic commentaries to the Torah, word for word, sentence by sentence. whereas the Zohar takes a sentence and goes off somewhere into the mystical world. The rabbis stated that there are 4 methods of interpretation of every Torah text, and they're based upon a very important word, pardes, which means paradise. Pardes, paradise, sounds very familiar, right? Okay. P for Peshat, which means the literal meaning of the text. The Resh, the second word, pardes, means remez, what's hinted at in the text. The third one is Darash, which means, what is the teaching? What can I walk away with this? And then the last one, Pardes, the last one is a Samech, which is Sod, which means, what is the deeper, mystical, spiritual teaching in this? And you can apply all 4 levels to every single word, and some rabbis to every single letter in the entire Torah. And by the way, those of you who come tomorrow night to watch me do this, now you know what I'm doing in my little comment before the Torah portion on the first word in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra. Okay, that's exciting, right, Aaron?
Oh, yeah.
You can't wait. Okay. Next, last one here, teshuvot, response to literature. The word teshuvot is the plural of the word teshuvah. Of course, you know teshuvah means repentance, but it also means answer. Rabbis are always being asked questions, especially in the Orthodox community. So take, for instance, when all of a sudden you're forbidden to turn a light on or off on Shabbat. Okay, this is the passage. 100 years ago, I guess, yeah, I can say 100 years ago, that's it. The lights are off, and you could turn the light on, but you can't shut it off. I'll never forget, Judy and I we grew up in Rockaway, many of you know, in Rockaway we had a very Orthodox friend, actually. She's now living up at Moss, up in wherever that place is, Okeechobee, wherever that place is. West Palm Beach, thank you. It's very far from here. But anyway, Rhoda lives up there, a wonderful woman. Her father was a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, and actually Judy and I were married under his chuppah. But anyway, it's probably more than you want to know. But anyway, one winter time we went to Rhoda's house to have Shabbat lunch. And I was brought up very well behaved, right, Betty? I was very behaved. There's Betty. Let's give her Betty. Okay. Anyway, I had to go to the bathroom, so I used the bathroom after eating, and I was always well behaved. And my parents told me that if a light is on in a bathroom, when you leave the bathroom, what do you do? Well, that didn't work out too well, because I turned the light off, and then I went like. I said, uh-oh, because they can't turn the light back on. Okay, it's forbidden now, and they have to go to the bathroom in the dark, and hopefully that's no problem. However, the fact is, the world is different. So when the timer came about, some Orthodox rabbi, I'm sure, they wrote him a question, or asked a question that became a written form. Is a timer kosher? And by the way, I'm learning this now in terms of another class I'm taking. A Shabbos goy is totally forbidden. You cannot do that. Okay, you cannot simply ask a non-Jew, Christopher, can you violate Shabbat for me and go turn that light on? You can't do that. It says it's specifically against Jewish law, but rather you can only say to him, you know something, it's very dark in my house on Saturday. Do you think you could help me? Okay, you can't ask him to violate a law. Now you might say, well, how do I know that? That's because I'm studying this book with another teacher called Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah, written in the 1700s by the Chafetz Chaim, this guy, I forget his name, can't remember his name right now. Anyway, is a commentary to the Shulchan Aruch, written in the 1700s, 200 years later. Another one. We don't stop talking. You wonder why Jews don't stop talking. We don't stop writing. Look at this. This is called Mishnah Berurah, which is one of the main texts in Jewish and Orthodox Judaism today. They study this, and they study the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so take for instance the Teshuvah, which I'm using here down. And by the way, I took all of these quotes from Sephariah. So I didn't write, this is not my writing, I didn't make any of this up either. See, if you ever thought I'd make this stuff up, well, I don't make any of this up. Well, no. Okay, anyway, the fact is, there was a question in the 1970s that arose. You'll notice that this question was asked of one of the greatest halakhic authorities of modern times, Orthodox, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was associated with these... Okay, we associate with Yeshiva University in New York, of course. And Moshe Feinstein was one of the greatest modern halachic rabbis, who obviously Orthodox. And this is from his work, he wrote Moshe, which means the answers, the letters of Moshe Feinstein to Yoredeya. Yoredeya is one of the sections of the Shulchan Aruch. So notice, going back to the question that was asked, they're going back to one of the sources to ask the question, how is this possible? And notice he wrote, he lived 1895 to 1986, so you can call him a modern guy, not modern. But there are other authorities today everywhere in the Orthodox world. Okay, so anyway, we're going to turn the page, our knowledge. Okay, you notice, our knowledge of when a man is considered to be legally dead is recorded in Talmud Yoma. Again, now you know what Talmud is. Yoma is one of the sections of the Talmud. 85a. By the way, it says A. The way they printed books in pre-modern times was, because the way you print a book, and Betty knows this from printing, let's say, the Gala Journal. There's an A side and a B side to pages when you print it. Okay? If a house collapses and buries a man within, we're required to move the debris in an attempt to find him, even if it is the Shabbat. When he is found, he is examined ad chotmo, up to his nose. Okay? Why was this question even being asked? Because the fun thing about the Teshuvot, which are very, very difficult to understand, there are Teshuvot in English, but they're based upon other laws. You have to know those laws, otherwise you have no understand what in the world's going on here. But you also have to know what the problem is. What is the problem? In the 1970s at Harvard University, they came up with a brand new criteria of when a person can be declared dead by brain death. Up until that time, there was only one way, legally, in which a person could be considered to be dead, and that is you put your finger on his nose, you don't feel any air coming through, kaput, put him in the coffin, and that's it. Zeitgesund. Which, by the way, are mistakes made. Yeah, there's actually this famous short story by Edgar Allan Poe, I do believe, as well as that's one of the reasons why they bury people, not in the Jewish community, maybe others as well, with, guess what, a bell in the casket, in case they were still alive. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, yeah, it's not good. Okay, it's not good.
Or strain.
Yeah, that too. All kinds of things, yeah. Because people were, sadly enough, assumed to be dead, but weren't. Especially if you do it that way, or if you feel the chest. For those of you who have experienced this kind of a situation with a loved one or a friend, I remember years ago I was visiting someone, I don't remember, was it here back in Long Island, and I really thought they were dead. Because I walked in the room and said, "Hi, Steve," and nothing. And I went over, I shook him, nothing. So I yelled the loudest I could in his ear, still nothing. So I actually went like this. Maybe he was alive, yeah, maybe. But I really thought there was no movement in even his chest. Okay, it could be heard. Linda.
All right, Dr. Charles Golden, my son-in-law. This was his final. Thank you. Dr. Charles Golden, my son-in-law. This is a book that he wrote, and it was published, and it has to do with neuropsychology and how you determine whether people who are trapped inside of their bodies but unable to speak are actually alive, thinking, and so on. It has to do with using machinery to check your brain, and I don't know what, but it's on the same topic.
Yeah, good. And in the 1970s, Harvard criteria came up with the brain death. Why? Okay, it's taking 3 EEGs, in other words, brain measurements, brain activity, over a 24-hour period of time. And if there's 0, none over a period of time, you can declare the person dead, even if theoretically they wouldn't be necessarily breathing at that point, but on machine or whatever. And the reason for this is why? Why did they have to come? Why in the 1970s? What happened in the 1970s in medicine? Transplants. Okay, because in order, you need a body, you need blood moving through the body, respiration to be occurring, so that the heart is for a heart transplant or liver transplant or whatever else it is. Okay, anything, and the minute, so that if, and the Orthodox community had to confront this because of this. The Talmud specifically says, ad chotmo, meaning put your finger under the nose. If the person is still breathing, even the brain dead, if they're a vegetable, it doesn't make a bit of difference. And this became a real big problem for the Orthodox community for the first time. So let's see where he goes with this.
Wait, so do they have to rely on the brain survey, not just the breath under the nose?
Yes. Well, that's legally, yes. Today you can do that now. But obviously there are certain communities which won't accept that. Okay, you don't have to accept that. But on the other, but Orthodox rabbis had to confront this. And you have to take it seriously because otherwise you're violating Jewish law. Okay. So.
But also within the strong Orthodox community, you are not a donor of a body part.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a whole other part. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Let's continue here. It's very interesting. So too does the Rambam rule. In other words, Moses Feinstein, this is his writing, refers to Maimonides. You know that, Mishnah Torah, you know that, laws of Sabbath. As does the Shulchan Aruch HaOrachaim. In other words, notice what he's doing. He's quoting the previous sources for his ruling. If no sign of life is detected when the nose is examined, i.e. no respiratory activity is detected, then the victim is deemed to be dead, solely on the inability to breathe. If the victim's respiration is extremely shallow, he is still regarded as alive. This is determined by placing a feather or a thin piece of tissue paper near his nostrils. Okay, next paragraph. However, it is necessary to examine his breathing many times, as I've already explained in previous responsum. In other words, he's been asked this question many times. Because going back to the 1970s, this was a big question. Because why? According to Orthodox traditional Jewish law, which we just read about, if you go according to brain death, you are committing murder. Because the person still might be breathing and you're committing murder, which is a capital offense under Jewish law. You can't do that. Which is why traditional Jewish law would only allow the transplantation of non-critical organs. In other words, the only organs you can transplant are a kidney or a cornea. No other organs, because guess what? Any other organ, you'd have to go by the brain dead criteria and not the nose business, okay, the breathing. And they had to confront this to this very day, and Orthodox law still remain, real law, I'm talking about the Hasidic community, the real front people, they still have to follow this. So I didn't quote the entire response here, so I'm not sure what Moshe Feinstein ended up saying to this person. Maybe I should have, sorry, but you can look up yourself now. But the fact is that he had to confront this because people were concerned. Okay? Their loved one, let's say even Orthodox, the loved one is in a terrible car accident and they're lying in a hospital, there's no brain function whatsoever, and there's another person in the bed down the hall who could use his heart. And they go to this person and say, you know, what's the deal here? And they say, well, I have to talk to my wife. If you're Orthodox, who do you ask? Right, you don't ask Dr. Ruth. Yeah, you ask whom? Your rabbi. And if it's an Orthodox, I'll tell you another frightening story. I was a chaplain at the burn unit, the Cornell burn unit in New York, which was a major burn associated with the Cornell New York Hospital, which is the major burn unit in New York City. All of the firefighters, everyone, that's where everyone was medevaced to. And I saw some pretty terrible cases there. What was very interesting was during Pesach is coming up now with the burning of Clements. Hasidim have no idea, they don't barbecue, okay? They don't have a backyard barbecue business. And especially going back to the old days with charcoal, you can have fires backing up on you. They had no idea what in the world they were doing. And so many times at Pesach, we would have Hasidim coming into the burn unit, horribly burned, because they put too much lighter fluid on it, backed up, whatever. Anyway, what was the saddest part was children, because the kids didn't understand this either, and they got involved in this. And there's one Hasidic boy who was horribly burned from a barbecue situation. And they tried a number of grafts, skin grafts, and they weren't working. And quite often, one of the best skin grafts comes from a pig, okay? Quite often works very, very well. There's a lot of similarities between us and a pig, and I do know some people who are not. Anyway, they called up their Rebbe to say, what do we do? And the first Rebbe they called up actually told them, no, it's forbidden, it is treif. And they denied the doctor, and the doctor said, well, then your child's going to die. And the suggestion was not from me, but someone else, call another Rebbe. And they did call another Rebbe, and that Rebbe said, of course you can, because bekuach nefesh, the saving of a life transcends anything and everything. So you get these variations of opinions, but you can see how powerful the teshuvot are. The answers Rabbi give, and how serious they can be, life and death sometimes. Yeah, that's amazing, right? I mean, that's a true story that I experienced. I'm okay. It's been a lot of talking today, thanks. I experienced firsthand. So, notice what we have here, this parade, and this is, I quote, 5, 6 books, okay. There's thousands, beyond thousands, hundreds of thousands of books on Jewish law, Jewish life, written through the centuries. And that to me is very exciting. And which is why really, if you take any of this on any level seriously, it never ends. You should, and this is why they say you should be studying Torah all the time. You could be. So let's say, for instance, you're standing online. Don't fly, right? Okay, you're going to be TSA lane from the hours. But you're studying online. On your phone, you can download all, either Shulchan Aruch, download it on my phone. I have this other book that has daily readings in Torah, Bible, Mishnah, Talmud, Zohar, Tanya, 7 different books for every single day of the week online. I have it in print and I have it online. So guess what? If I'm standing online really bored, or I'm in a doctor's office like I was yesterday, I take this out and I study it. You never have to be, oh, I'm so bored. Why is this line in Costco, why are they so slow? Well, take out something and study it, okay? Because this is what Jewish life is based upon. Yeah.
DNA, I guess Orthodox people do not sign any kind of waiver like that.
What, DNA? I mean DNR. DNR.
I'm sorry,
Right.
DNR.
No, they wouldn't. Right. There's a whole question about, let's go another area, the question of autopsies. Orthodox law, traditional Jewish law, has for thousands of years forbidden an autopsy. And understandably, in the sense that pre-modern times, God knows what happens, and they steal organs and use it for witchcraft, and all kinds of crazy stuff happen. Today, that doesn't happen. In my professional life, I guess you'd say, I signed up to witness 2 autopsies, because I wanted to experience an autopsy, not just simply, who was it, Quincy, Dr. Quincy, remember him? Right? Yes. Great show, right, Quincy? Yes. Yeah. Well, that's not real, okay. Although when they fainted, that was pretty cool. However, I signed up and I went to an autopsy over in Riverhead twice. One was a 13-year-old girl who died in a car accident. And it's really, you walk away and you realize from this, it didn't gross me out, which is amazing because when I was a kid, like for instance, there was the doctor show on TV, I ran out of the room. And yet I went to see an autopsy, I can imagine. But he was doing the skull part, and he showed me, you see this line here on the skull? That's what killed her. She was in the back seat, the car was in an accident, and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt and thrown back and forth, and she died of a fractured skull. It was just a single pencil line in her skull that killed her. I came away from this experience with a feeling, if I didn't have it before, of an awesomeness of the human body. It's really incredible. But the fact is, where do autopsies go now? What happens? Because when I was at Sloan Kettering, one of the big questions is a hospital such as Sloan Kettering, I'm sure other hospitals as well, are required to have a minimum number of autopsies done a year in the hospital, okay? They cannot avoid that. Obviously, checking up to make sure everything is correctly done, blah, blah, blah. And so there were times when someone from the hospital would come to so-and-so and say, Moish, I'm sorry that your wife, Sadie, just died, but would you be willing to do an autopsy? And if he's Orthodox or even Jewish, most often they say, oh no, we don't allow that, let's just move this along. However, the Orthodox community in New York, the Orthodox community did develop what's called a limited autopsy, and that was by teshuvah, accepted by most of I'm sure the Hasidim didn't, but most of the community accepted that. And this was called the gross autopsy. They simply open the body and look at everything. But let's say, for instance, there was a person with a very, very rare cancer, and the hospital said, you know something, we really could use an autopsy to understand more about how that cancer developed, what blah, blah, blah. That's called a limited autopsy, where they open up the body. So, for instance, my father died of a cancer called pseudomyxoma, which is a very, very rare cancer, abdominal cancer, and they didn't ask for an autopsy in this case, but they would have just opened up his abdomen, which is the only place that a pseudomyxoma goes, and just that one part of the body, not do a gross autopsy. For most Orthodox rabbis, the New York metropolitan area at least, that is acceptable. So Judaism does change at times, but again, obviously there's reform in which, I'm not going to say anything is acceptable, but hopefully we're aware of the laws and the traditions and work within parameters. But notice what happens. The more you move along from Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Hasidim, real Hasidim, further Hasidim, the world shrinks more and more and more and more. So it's very, very limited because you have all of these laws. Jane, you have a question?
Yeah, do the Orthodox or the ultra-Orthodox allow donation or donating body parts if someone dies? They will not allow body parts to be donated, or will they accept donated body parts?
Well, but I'm not sure what you mean, because you can't donate a heart or anything, because if the person has stopped breathing, then that organ is worthless. It dries, it's not functioning, it's worthless. You can donate a cornea or a kidney, yeah.
No, but if a doctor determines that they want to have a donated lung or heart or kidney, will Orthodox accept it, ultra-Orthodox, but they won't give it?
Right. Well, I'm assuming they would accept it, I'm assuming, right, yeah. Lynn?
This happened close to 30 years ago. My father worked part-time in his retirement and passed away in a semi-public place, and the Broward County Board of Examiners decided they were going to do an autopsy. I fought it for about 15 hours and said, no, you're not. I had to get a rabbi to sign a document with me at that time. And I don't know whether or not Broward County changed its rules at this point, but it was horrific.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, the thing is this, like when the TWA flight went down off of Long Island a number of years ago, I was a chaplain in the police department then, and they called me in to help with a lot of Orthodox members because they want to do autopsies on the bodies to determine the death, what they died of. And they, I have to explain and whatnot to help people all the time, yeah.
But the fact that my signature was not enough.
Yeah.
And
Well, I don't know about that, but, yeah. Oh, Linda?
Same question, whether or not they've changed it in Broward County or whether Palm Beach County requires the same thing. My mother died, and they insisted that they had to do an autopsy. She was in a nursing unit inside of an assisted living facility, and they insisted on it.
Well, you might be able to fight it eventually. Obviously, the Talmud does have a concept which is Dina de Malchuta Dina, which means the law of the land is the law, our law. In other words, if the law states, for instance, if the accompaniment is a murder, then there's no question an autopsy has to be done. It could be a constant, it doesn't make a bit of difference. You have no choice for the purposes of that. Maybe they felt some kind of a violation was being done for you.
A violation was done because one particular doctor was on a cruise. They could not reach that doctor, and there was something life-saving that could have been done if the doctor had allowed it, but that's the way it went.
If there's obviously a legal reason for doing it, then even the Orthodox have no choice.
That was 1984.
But there were many times that I got involved with the MD's office on Long Island in terms of calling on behalf of families saying they are Jewish and therefore it shouldn't be done. If it has to be, it has to be. You have no choice, obviously. Again, the ruling is the law of the land has to be our law. We can't be violating the laws that we live in. So with that, I'm going to end in a second. There's something I hope you enjoyed today. There's a lot of stuff. Next week, I'm going to be talking about a little bit of quickly, within 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you all about Jewish history in 15 minutes. And then talking about the life cycle, okay? I'll end with one final story about Orthodox and how complicated it can be. Again, I was a chaplain not only at Sloan Kettering, but across the street at New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center. And there's a large Hasidic community from New York that goes to New York Hospital, Cornell, then and even now. And the Satmar group called me up, you can imagine, and they said the Satmar Rebbe sent an emissary to speak to me to help them because they did not find the kosher meals that were being provided to patients acceptable. It had to be glatt kosher, which is another level of kashrut. Don't ask me what glatt kosher is, it's like, God knows what it is. But then you also need the glatt kosher of the supervision of the Lubavitcher Rebbe at that time was Joel Teitelbaum. That's the only food they would eat, and the hospital denied that food to them. They could bring it themselves, but they felt the hospital should provide that on the menu. So it was amazing, the meeting. There I was in my sports jacket in tie and my kippah, and of course, and there he was with the knickers, the whole shtick, and the paste down to his bucket, and everything. It was quite something. His name was Rabbi Weeder. I remember him to this day. It's like 40 years ago. And he told me the reason, and I always feel I'll always stand up for all Jews, even if it's things that I certainly have no interest in or it's not a part of my life, to say the least. So I called the head of the dietary department up, set up a meeting with her, and he wouldn't meet with her because he won't talk to a woman. So it was me, myself, and I explained the situation, and she's not Jewish. It's hard enough for non-Jews to understand kashrut. No less glatt kosher, no less Joel Teitelbaum's kashrut. She had no idea. Anyway, believe it or not, for 3 years, every single month, I had a meeting with the dietary staff to try to convince them to have this glatt kosher Joel Teitelbaum food provided by the hospital. It made no sense financially for the hospital, because what are you talking about, 20 Hasidim? They have that. The hospital, if you've been to the hospital, you know what I'm talking about. It's thousands of patients. They can't afford to do that. And they need kosher food they put in the freezer, and they could easily do it that way. And this was 3 years of meeting from now. In fact, at one point in time, the meetings were canceled because the Hasidic, the Satmar community actually took out a class action suit against the hospital, believing that they were actually discriminating against their kind of Jews. Believe it or not, after 3 years I was successful. I'm very stubborn. And after 3 years, I fight for what I think is important, and after 3 years, to this very day, there is a part on the menu of glatt kosher with Joel Teitelbaum's hashgacha on the menu. But the whole point is, where is this coming from? But if they can go back to these laws and find the basis for what they think is important. And that's the amazing thing about the Jewish community. We have all different complexions, we have all different backgrounds, all different practices, but we're still all Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel, and may we live forever. Amen. Have a lovely day, everyone. See you tomorrow night, hopefully. And see you guys tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
What are you going to do?
I have a big whip. Don't worry.
Interesting.
I will the prayers.
Joseph.
Wait.
Total blessings. Would you say you did the total blessings?
We did.